Emily Carter had always trusted the quiet rhythm of her marriage, the small routines that made life in their suburban Chicago home feel steady and safe. So when Daniel told her he wanted to invite his college friends over to celebrate his promotion, she felt proud of him and eager to play the part of the supportive wife, spending the whole Friday cleaning the house, arranging fresh flowers on the dining table, lighting soft candles, and choosing a navy dress he once said made her look beautiful. In a simple, effortless way, she told herself this would be a good night, a reminder of their early years when they laughed easily and stayed up late talking about dreams. But when the doorbell rang and Daniel's friend stepped inside with loud voices and heavy cologne, something in the air shifted, not dangerous, not violent, but restless and charged, like a storm waiting to break. At first, everything seemed normal as the men shook her hand and complimented the house, and she moved between the kitchen and living room carrying plates of food while music played softly in the background. Yet as drinks were poured and stories from college days grew louder, their humor changed tone, turning sharper and less respectful, and she began to notice the way their eyes lingered too long, the way their jokes about Daniel being lucky carried an edge that made her skin tighten. She tried to laugh politely, to brush it off, but the comments kept coming, wrapped in smiles yet heavy with suggestion, and every time she glanced at Daniel, hoping he would step in, he only grinned wider, enjoying the attention from his friends, enjoying being the center of the room, unaware, or unwilling to see, that his wife was slowly shrinking under the weight of their careless words. Emily felt surrounded, not physically touched, not harmed, but emotionally crowded, as if the space around her had grown smaller and the walls had leaned in. One of the men joked that Daniel should watch out or someone might steal her, another asked her how she kept herself looking so good, and though the words were framed as compliments, they felt like tiny scratches on glass, and what hurt most was Daniel's laughter blending with theirs, his silence becoming agreement, his pride turning into permission. And she realized with a sudden chill that she was alone in a room full of people, alone in her own home, standing in heels that suddenly felt too high, in a dress that now felt like armor too thin. She excused herself politely, saying she needed to check on something upstairs, and as she climbed the staircase she could still hear their voices floating up, loud and careless, and when she closed the bedroom door behind her the quiet felt almost shocking. Her hands trembling as she sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, wondering when she had become invisible to the one person who promised to protect her, and she replayed the evening in her mind, questioning if she was overreacting, if maybe she was too sensitive, but deep down she knew respect had been crossed, not in a dramatic scene but in small moments that stacked together like stones pressing against her chest. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark Chicago sky, the streetlights glowing softly on the empty road, and she remembered the early days of her marriage when Daniel would hold her hand tightly in crowded places, when he would gently pull her closer if someone looked at her the wrong way, and she felt a sharp contrast between that memory and the man laughing downstairs, and it wasn't jealousy that hurt her, it was the feeling that her dignity had become entertainment for others. That her comfort mattered less than his pride. She realized that protection isn't about fighting or shouting, it's about awareness, about stepping in with calm strength, about making it clear that your partner's boundaries are sacred, and tonight Daniel had done none of that. After a few minutes, she wiped her eyes carefully so her makeup wouldn't smudge, straightened her shoulders, and returned downstairs, determined not to create a scene, because she valued grace even when others did not, and the men barely noticed her return except to throw another playful remark her way, which she answered with short, polite responses before retreating to the kitchen, counting the minutes until the night would end. When the front door finally closed behind the last guest, the house fell into silence, but it was not peaceful silence, it was heavy and full of unspoken words, and Daniel, slightly flushed from drinks, wrapped his arm around her waist and said, "See? That was fun," as if nothing had shifted, as if her heart had not cracked open in small invisible lines. She looked at him, searching for a sign that he understood, but his eyes were relaxed, satisfied, proud of the evening, and she realized that sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive in dramatic confessions or secret messages. Sometimes it begins in moments when someone fails to stand beside you, when laughter replaces loyalty, and she felt something inside her grow quiet, not angry, not explosive, just deeply disappointed. And as she turned off the lights and prepared for bed, lying next to the man she loved yet suddenly felt distant from, she understood that the night had changed something important, something fragile, and though the house looked the same and the world outside continued as usual, a new awareness had settled into her heart, whispering that respect once lost is not easily restored, and that this was only the beginning of a story she never expected to live. The morning after the party felt strangely normal, and that was what unsettled Emily the most, because sunlight poured through the kitchen windows just as it always did, the coffee machine hummed softly, and Daniel walked in wearing his usual calm expression as if the night before had left no mark at all, while she stood at the counter stirring sugar into her cup with hands that still remembered the tremble she had hidden upstairs. He kissed her cheek and thanked her for hosting, then casually said his friends had a great time, and when she carefully told him she had felt uncomfortable with some of the comments, he paused only for a second before smiling lightly and saying they were just joking, that she shouldn't take things so seriously, that this was how guys talked, and his tone wasn't cruel but dismissive, smooth in a way that made her doubt her own feelings, and that doubt began to settle deep inside her chest. Emily tried to explain again, choosing calm words, saying it wasn't about jokes but about respect, about how she felt alone in that room. But Daniel sighed as if the conversation was tiring, saying she was overthinking and that he didn't want to argue over something so small, and the word small hit her harder than the jokes ever had, because what felt big to her clearly meant nothing to him, and she realized that sometimes pain grows not from what happened but from how it is minimized. Afterward, the rest of the day passed in quiet tension. Daniel left for work, and Emily cleaned the house slowly, picking up empty glasses and folding blankets, each small task giving her too much time to think, and she replayed every moment of the night, not with anger now but with sadness, noticing how quickly Daniel had chosen comfort over courage, laughter over loyalty, and she wondered when he had stopped seeing her as someone to protect and started seeing her as someone strong enough to handle anything alone. She wasn't asking for drama, she wasn't asking him to fight anyone. She only wanted him to notice, to say, "That's enough," to make it clear she mattered, but that moment had never come. As days passed, something subtle shifted between them, like a thin sheet of glass placed down the center of their marriage, invisible but impossible to ignore. Their conversations became practical and short, about grocery lists and schedules, about bills and errands, but the warmth beneath those words faded, and Emily stopped waiting by the window when Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, stopped asking how his day had been with genuine curiosity, because every time she tried to open her heart, she felt it close again under the weight of his indifference. Daniel seemed unaware of the change or perhaps chose not to see it. He stayed longer at work, checked his phone more often, laughed at messages she couldn't see, and when she asked simple questions, he answered briefly, distracted, as if his attention belonged somewhere else, and the silence in their house began to feel louder than the party had been, filling rooms with unsaid words and quiet disappointments. One afternoon, Emily met her close friend Sarah at a small coffee shop downtown, and as they sat by the window with warm cups between their hands, Emily finally let her guard down and explained everything, not in a dramatic way but in a tired, honest voice. And Sarah listened carefully before asking a question that stayed with her long after the conversation ended. "Do you feel safe in your marriage?" The word safe echoed inside her mind all evening, because safety wasn't about physical danger, it was about emotional shelter, about knowing your partner stands beside you without hesitation, and as she drove home under the fading light of the sky, she realized she hadn't felt that kind of shelter in a long time. That night, lying next to Daniel as he scrolled through his phone with a faint smile on his face, Emily studied the ceiling and felt lonelier than she ever had in her life, even though the man she married was only inches away, and she began to understand that loneliness inside a relationship can be heavier than loneliness outside of one. She missed the version of Daniel who used to hold her hand in crowded places, who would notice when her mood shifted, who would defend her gently without being asked, and she wondered if that man had changed or if she had simply opened her eyes. The distance between them grew quietly but steadily, like a crack spreading across glass, and Emily started focusing more on herself, reading late at night, taking longer walks in the neighborhood, finding small pockets of peace away from the tension at home. Yet even in those moments, her heart felt restless because she still loved Daniel, still hoped he would look up one day and see what was slipping away. She didn't want grand apologies or dramatic promises, she only wanted acknowledgement, a simple understanding that her feelings were valid. But every attempt to talk ended the same way, with him brushing it off, calling it unnecessary drama, telling her to relax, and with each dismissal, a piece of her trust quietly folded inward. Weeks passed, and what began as discomfort slowly turned into emotional distance, and though they still shared meals and slept in the same bed, their connection felt thinner, stretched by silence and pride, and Emily began to question not only that night but the deeper foundation of their marriage, wondering if respect had been fading long before she noticed. She didn't shout, she didn't accuse, she simply observed. And what she saw frightened her more than any argument could have, because it wasn't explosive conflict that threatened them, it was indifference, the slow erosion of care, the quiet acceptance of emotional neglect. By the end of the month, Emily understood something painful but clear. The party had not been the true breaking point, it had only revealed what was already there, a growing imbalance where her feelings were secondary and his comfort came first. And as she stood alone in the kitchen one evening watching the sun set beyond the trees, she realized that marriages don't fall apart in one loud moment, they unravel in silence, in repeated dismissals, in laughter that replaces loyalty. And though she still hoped for change, a small voice inside her began preparing for a future where she might have to choose herself if Daniel continued choosing everything else. A few weeks after the silence began to settle heavily between her and Daniel, Emily decided she could not keep waiting for something to change inside a house that felt colder each day, so she signed up to volunteer at a community center near downtown Chicago, telling herself she needed fresh air, new faces, something that belonged only to her. And on her first Saturday there she arrived early, nervous but determined, tying her hair back and putting on a simple sweater, ready to help organize donations and tutor kids after school. And that was when she met Michael Thompson, a quiet man in his mid-30s with calm eyes and an easy smile who introduced himself without arrogance, shook her hand respectfully, and thanked her for volunteering as if her presence truly mattered. From the start, there was something steady about him, not dramatic, not charming in a loud way like Daniel's friends, but grounded, and as they worked side by side sorting boxes of books and canned food, he asked her simple questions about her interests, listened carefully to her answers, and responded thoughtfully instead of interrupting or joking carelessly. And Emily noticed how different it felt to be heard without having to fight for space. She told herself it was nothing, just kindness between two adults doing good work, yet the warmth of that interaction stayed with her long after she drove home that evening to a quiet house where Daniel was still at work and a single lamp glowed in the living room. Days turned into weeks, and volunteering became her safe place, a space where she felt capable and valued. And Michael often worked the same shifts, always polite, always respectful, sometimes bringing coffee for the team and remembering that she preferred tea, a small detail that surprised her because Daniel had long ago stopped noticing such things. And though Emily kept her conversations light, she found herself smiling more easily around Michael, laughing softly at his dry humor, feeling a spark of confidence return to her voice that she had almost forgotten existed. One afternoon, as they arranged chairs in a classroom for an evening workshop, their hands brushed briefly while reaching for the same stack, and the touch was accidental, innocent, but it sent a quick, unexpected wave of awareness through her, not inappropriate, not overwhelming, just a reminder that she was still a woman who could feel connection, and she pulled her hand back quickly, offering a small apology that he waved off kindly, yet her heart beat faster for reasons she did not want to examine too closely. On the drive home that day, she kept replaying the moment, not because it was dramatic but because it felt like proof that she was not invisible, that someone could stand near her without making her uncomfortable, that attention could feel gentle instead of careless. Meanwhile, Daniel grew more distant, his late nights becoming common, his phone always within reach, his laughter directed at a screen rather than at her, and when she asked how work was going, he answered briefly before changing the subject, and though she tried not to assume the worst, a quiet suspicion began to form as she noticed him stepping outside to take calls or turning his phone face down when she entered the room. She did not want to spy or accuse, yet the gap between them widened daily, and she felt as if she were living beside a stranger who shared her bed but not her heart. One evening, while Daniel showered, his phone lit up on the nightstand with a message preview from someone named Ashley, a name she had never heard before, and the message was short but intimate in tone, asking if he missed her smile, and Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the screen, not touching it, not opening anything, just absorbing the reality that what she feared might already be true. When Daniel returned, she asked calmly who Ashley was, and he barely hesitated before saying she was just a co-worker, that Emily was imagining things again, that she needed to relax, and his dismissive tone felt painfully familiar, echoing the way he had brushed off her discomfort after the party, and in that moment she realized a pattern, a steady refusal to acknowledge her feelings as valid. The next day at the community center, Emily felt distracted, her thoughts heavy, but Michael noticed and gently asked if she was okay, and for a second she considered brushing it off the way Daniel did to her, yet instead she admitted she was just tired, and he nodded without pushing, simply saying that everyone deserves to feel supported, a simple sentence that lingered with her because it was not advice or judgment, just a quiet truth. She began to understand that emotional safety is built in small moments, in listening without dismissing, in respect without condition, and the contrast between the two men in her life became clearer with each passing day. Emily struggled with guilt, not because she had done anything wrong, but because she felt her heart responding to kindness at a time when her marriage felt fragile, and she questioned herself constantly, reminding herself she was still committed, still trying, yet she could not ignore the growing awareness that she had been starving for attention that felt healthy and sincere. She set boundaries carefully, keeping her interactions with Michael professional and appropriate, determined not to cross any lines, but she could not deny that her confidence returned when she was around him, that she stood taller, spoke brighter, laughed freer, and that change frightened her because it showed her how much she had shrunk at home. As Daniel's behavior grew colder and more secretive, Emily began to see that whatever connection she once shared with him was slipping quietly through her fingers, not because of one dramatic betrayal yet, but because of repeated neglect and denial, and though she had not stepped outside her vows, emotionally she felt herself drifting toward a new understanding of what partnership should feel like, and the realization was both empowering and heartbreaking. She understood that attraction is not only about physical closeness but about feeling valued, and for the first time in months, she felt valued somewhere, even if she was not ready to admit how deeply that mattered. By the end of that month, Emily stood at a crossroads she never expected, torn between loyalty to a marriage that felt increasingly hollow and a quiet awakening inside her that whispered she deserved more than silence and dismissal, and though she had not made any decisions yet, she sensed that change was coming, because once a person remembers what respect feels like, it becomes impossible to accept anything less. And as she locked up the community center one evening with Michael offering a warm goodbye, she walked to her car under the fading city lights knowing that her heart was no longer asleep, and whatever truth awaited her at home, she would soon have to face it. The truth did not arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly one evening when Emily sat alone at the dining table, Daniel's laptop open in front of her after he had rushed out to take a call and forgotten to close his email. And she had not planned to look, had not wanted to become the kind of wife who searches for proof, but a notification had appeared on the screen with Ashley's name glowing in bold letters, and before she could stop herself, she read enough to understand that the distance she felt was not imagined, that the late nights and secret smiles had meaning, that Daniel had been sharing parts of himself with another woman that he no longer shared with her, and as her eyes moved across the words, plans to meet, private jokes, promises to figure things out soon, her heart did not explode the way she once feared it would. Instead, it slowed, heavy and steady, as if bracing for impact. She closed the laptop carefully, folded her hands on the table, and sat in silence for a long moment, realizing that the betrayal hurt deeply, but the greater pain came from how long she had tried to ignore the signs, how many times she had been told she was overthinking, how often her feelings had been dismissed as dramatic, and in that stillness she felt something unexpected rising inside her, not rage, not revenge, but clarity. She understood now that respect cannot survive where honesty is absent, and she saw clearly that the night of the party had only been the beginning of a deeper fracture that had widened with every lie and every careless laugh. When Daniel returned home later that night, cheerful and unaware of what she knew, she asked him to sit down, her voice calm but firm, and the seriousness in her tone made him pause, and as he lowered himself into the chair across from her, she looked directly into his eyes and said she had read the emails, that she knew about Ashley, that she was done pretending everything was fine, and for the first time in months, Daniel did not dismiss her feelings immediately. Instead, he looked startled, then defensive, then regretful, all within seconds, offering explanations about stress, about feeling misunderstood, about needing attention, but his words sounded thin compared to the evidence she had seen, and Emily realized that excuses, no matter how carefully spoken, could not rebuild what had been broken. She told him she had tried to communicate her pain after the party, had tried to explain how alone she felt, and that instead of listening, he had chosen to minimize her, and now he had chosen someone else to confide in rather than repair their marriage, and though tears filled her eyes, her voice remained steady because this was no longer about proving she was right, it was about protecting her own dignity, and Daniel reached across the table as if to hold her hand, promising he would end the outside relationship, promising he would change, but she gently pulled her hand back, not out of cruelty but out of understanding that change born from fear of loss is not always lasting. That night they spoke for hours, not shouting, not accusing, just laying bare the distance that had grown between them, and Emily realized that somewhere along the way she had begun shrinking to keep the peace, had lowered her expectations to avoid conflict, and had accepted emotional neglect because she feared being alone, yet in that moment she felt stronger than she had in years, because she understood that being alone would hurt less than staying where she was unseen. In the days that followed, she moved quietly through the house, sorting her belongings, looking at photographs from their early years with both sadness and gratitude, acknowledging that the love they once shared had been real but accepting that it had changed into something fragile and strained, and after careful thought, she told Daniel she wanted a separation, not as punishment but as a necessary step toward healing, and though he argued at first, insisting they could fix it, she explained that repair requires two people willing to listen before damage becomes severe, and he had ignored too many warnings. She did not hate him, she simply refused to continue in a space where her worth was questioned. Packing her things felt surreal, each folded sweater and framed photo marking the end of a chapter, but instead of collapsing under the weight of it, Emily felt a quiet resolve guiding her, and when she signed the lease for a small apartment downtown, the empty rooms did not frighten her, they felt like possibility, like space to breathe without tension pressing against her chest, and the first night she slept there alone, she expected tears, yet what she felt instead was calm, a gentle sense of reclaiming herself piece by piece. Michael remained a steady presence during that time, never crossing boundaries, never rushing her decisions, offering friendship and support without expectation, and she appreciated his patience because she knew she needed time to heal before allowing her heart to open again. She focused on rebuilding her confidence, continuing her volunteer work, reconnecting with friends she had neglected, rediscovering small joys like morning walks and quiet reading evenings, and slowly the weight of betrayal began to lift, replaced by a deeper understanding of her own strength. Months later, standing by the window of her new apartment overlooking the city lights, Emily reflected on how far she had come, remembering the night she felt surrounded and unseen, the weeks of silence and doubt, the painful discovery of truth, and she realized that while the experience had hurt deeply, it had also awakened her to the importance of self-respect, and she understood that love without protection, without honesty, without emotional safety, is not enough to sustain a marriage. When she eventually allowed herself to explore a deeper connection with Michael, it was done slowly and thoughtfully, built on open communication and mutual respect, not secrecy or desperation, and for the first time in a long while, she felt secure not because someone promised to protect her but because she had learned to protect herself. In the end, Emily did not see her story as one of destruction but of transformation, because she had faced betrayal without losing her grace, had chosen dignity over denial, and had discovered that sometimes the most powerful decision a woman can make is to walk away from what diminishes her and toward what honors her. And as she closed the curtains against the night and prepared for a new tomorrow, she felt certain that whatever came next would be built not on fear or silence but on the steady foundation of respect she now demanded and deserved.